Hey guys, it's Lexi and welcome to my Cosima Sweater vlog. So if you've been following my channel, you will know that I've been working on a test knit for Gregoria Fibers. It's her new Cosima sweater and the pattern has finally been released as of this Friday, 10/24. This is 2025, so if you're watching this in the future, it's already released. You can go have a look at it. The pattern will be linked down below. I'll link to her Ravelry page and you guys can give it a look. So how I came about doing this test knit, it was sort of by chance. I was browsing on Instagram. I was looking at Gregoria Fibers stories and she had a call for test knitters. So I applied and luckily I was selected. Now, this is my first test knit. I have to say it was an interesting experience, definitely some learning curves, but overall a really positive experience and really nothing too difficult or challenging about it. So I'm happy to report that. This sweater was actually the first Gregoria Fibers pattern that I've ever worked. I've admired a lot of her designs for a few years now, and I have definitely several more in my queue that I would like to get to working up. But this was actually the first pattern that I ever worked of hers. So like I said, everything was really smooth. I jive really well with her pattern writing. I think it's clear and concise, but there's enough information to give you, the confidence to move forward and know that, you're doing the right thing, you're making good decisions. So let me give you a little bit of background on the pattern. I actually have it here in front of me, so I'm just going to refer to it. Again, this is her Cosima sweater or Cosima sweater. If you guys know how to pronounce this correctly, please let me know. I did do a little bit of research on my own, but it didn't really give me a conclusive answer. So please feel free to correct me if you know. So in her suggestion for materials, she uses Filcolana Via and or Filcolana Pernilla. So both can be used in this pattern. It's a fingering plus a fingering equals a fingering at 14 wraps per inch. The gauge is 19 stitches and 28 rows equals 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So for me personally, I know I will mention this throughout the video, but I'll mention it here. I used Mini Alpakka by Sandnes Garn, held double in the colorway Blueberry. It will be linked below. And I have to say that I really enjoyed this fiber. I think it was a really nice choice for this sweater. I love the drape that the alpaca brings to it. I know alpaca does tend to kind of grow and grow and grow as you wear it, as you wash it. So that's something to kind of keep in mind if you're going to select alpaca, but I'm happy that I went with it. I think it's a nice change of pace because I do have a few, like merino or some kind of wool blend sweaters at this point. So the alpaca sort of is nice. And just a few more details. She works this up on a size US 7 needle or 4.5 millimeter needle. The estimated yardage for this pattern is between 1,340 and 1,914 yards or 1,225 meters up to 1,750 meters. So in my experience, I needed quite a bit more for this. I want to say I was around 2,200 or 300 meters or yards, whatever it was. My project actually is linked on the pattern page, so I'll link that down for you guys to peruse below. There are some more details about what I encountered with the project and the materials that I used. But like I said, I did require more yardage. I am quite tall. As you guys know, I mention this from time to time. I am 6 feet tall, so I needed extra length, especially in the sleeves. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. And just to give you a short overview of the pattern itself, it's a classic V-neck sweater, has drop shoulders and an oversized fit. It's worked from top to bottom. The shoulders are created using short rows to provide a more comfortable fit. The back is worked flat with some increases to shape the armholes. The front is then worked with increases to form the V-neck. And then finally, the front and back are joined at the underarm and the body is worked in the round with some decreases at the hem. So all in all, I would say this is a very beginner-friendly pattern. Even if you haven't worked short rows before, even if you haven't ever knit a sweater before, I think this would actually be a nice project to take on as your first knit. I kind of went the opposite way with my first garment knit. I just filmed a podcast, my previous podcast, where I'm wearing a vest, the Highland Home Vest by Alice Dunn Smith, I believe. And that has a lot of texture, a lot of cables. It's worked bottom up and then joined or then separated front and back for the armholes. So all that to say, that has a lot going on. This project definitely is very straightforward, very simple, and fairly intuitive, I would say. So if you're a beginner looking at this project or tuning into this vlog, I would say go for it. I really do think it would be a nice first project. I'll add in here that there are 8 sizes available. I'm going to read from the pattern here, but it's designed to have an oversized fit, intended to be worn with approximately 21 to 25 centimeters or 8¼ to 9¾ inches of positive ease at the bust. So the bust circumference measurements at the small end are 104 centimeters going up to 155. And then in inches, that would be 41 inches all the way up to 61 inches. So there are like a fair range of sizes here. It's meant to be kind of a big, baggy, oversized sweater. But I think if you needed to make modifications, this pattern does kind of give you the room to do that. So you guys will see, you know, kind of my process and my journey with this project. You'll see what worked well, if there were any points where I was confused or I needed to go back and sort of regroup. But all in all, I do think that this was a fairly straightforward pattern. It worked up very quickly. I really breezed through it, I would say. And I don't know, I think it's a great sweater that I would be tempted to knit again in different fibers. So you guys will see as the vlog progresses, and then we'll meet back here to sort of do kind of like a wrap up at the end.
What are you doing? How about you? Okay, so the pattern calls for a provisional cast on to start the shoulders. As you can see here, I've got 2 little wedges. Basically, one side is the right and one side is the left. And essentially, I was just working several rounds of short rows. So you can see here, I'm about to work across the last row and then join both pieces together to create the back. So I'm just continuing to knit across the work here, and then I begin to cast on stitches using the backwards loop method. Then you'll see I just give my stitches a quick count. And then I start pulling my saved stitches back onto the needle to join both shoulders for the back piece. So you see here, I'm rescuing these stitches that are on scrap yarn and putting them back on the needle. It's a little tricky because there's 2 strands of alpaca for every stitch, so just want to go slow and make sure you're actually grabbing the whole stitch. And then here, I'm just pulling the scrap yarn back out of the work because we no longer need it as the stitches are resting safely back on our needles. All right, so you see I have both pieces ready to work together now. After I've just cast on those stitches and placed the work back on the needle, I will continue to knit across, joining both pieces for the back. panel. So here you sort of see me examine my work. I'm noticing there's a hole. So essentially at this point, I realized I had to start over, but it doesn't really change the process of what I've just done here. So you'll see once I got back on track and corrected my mistake, I just brought myself back up to the same point and continued to add length in stockinette to the back panel until I got to the point where I was going to start making increases for the armholes. So you'll see me just knitting along out here, enjoying the weather. At the time, it was late August. We were coming down into Labor Day, and the garden was in full swing. So definitely enjoyed it and really love knitting outside when I can. Speaking of gardens, I couldn't resist, and I took a trip to a local garden center, Dietrich's. They had a really great selection of end-of-season perennials and even some annuals left. They have a great sale every Labor Day weekend, so sort of going to see what they had available, and they always have such nice stuff there. I really enjoy taking a trip. And you'll see my husband make a cameo. And then finally, Bunny was checking out what I brought home. So just a little aster and a small bunny grass to add to the garden, but can't help it, right?
Okay, so as you can see, I've gotten quite a bit done here. It's definitely curling up on itself. Give you guys a closer look. But I worked the back panel, and then I've started doing increases for the front. Maybe should give this like a mid-project block. I'm not totally sure if I'm gonna do that yet, but so far this pattern has been really great. She has you start off in the back with the shoulders, and then you work some short rows. After that, you join in the round, not in the round, you join the back together, you continue to knit the back panel down, and then you move on to some armhole increases. The nice thing about this project, as I've probably already mentioned, is the gauge. It's 19 stitches per 4 inches, so holding this double, it's really working up very quickly, and it's super satisfying. You know, when you're working on a sweater project, a lot of times, if it's stockinette, you know, it might be a little bit boring or whatever, but because this is so quick to knit up and you're kind of like moving through it so quickly, it's been really fun. You kind of just want to get on to the next part. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this pattern so far, and I'm really enjoying the yarn I chose. Hopefully, you know, the finished product will be what I'm envisioning, but it's been really fun. This is my first Gregoria Fibers pattern, as I may have mentioned. So I really like her style of writing. It's very clear, very concise, and I'm not really having too many issues in terms of discerning what, you know, she's trying to get across. So all in all, really enjoying it. I'm at the point now where I am going to pick up, you can see here, provisional cast on some scrap yarn. I'm gonna pick up the right hand shoulder now and start to work some short rows and then the V-neck increases on the right hand side. So I got a lot done over the last few days, and gonna continue cruising. Okay, so I've come to a bit of a break point here. I'm actually going to break for a little bit of lunch. So I was able to finish the front increases here, front shoulder. So I did some short row shaping. I did increases for the V-neck and the armhole, and I'm kind of at a good stopping point. So just to give you a bit of a reference here of the overall shape so far, we've got both sides, and we're about ready to join in the front here. So hopefully the next time you guys see this, the front panel will be joined together, and then I'll probably just continue to do the armhole shaping, armhole increases. And then eventually I think the next step would be to join everything in the round, the body in the round. Something I noticed actually, I've only used 2 skeins of yarn so far, so I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty impressed actually, but it's working up really beautifully. I do like the fabric, and I think it's shaping up really well. So I'll see you guys in the next clip. Hey guys, we're back. So I did join the front and the back panel here, and I've started working in the round. I am very happy with the way this is shaping up. I put this on some scrap yarn just so I can try it on a little bit here, but I think it's sitting really nicely in the back. Those short rows really do help to sort of, you know, add shaping to the sweater. The armhole looks like it's sitting correctly in the right spot. And I like the depth of the V-neck. Overall, just pretty pleased with it. I do have a little bit more length to do before I start working some body shaping, so I will continue to add to the sweater a little bit before, you know, jumping into the rest of the pattern. But overall, really thrilled. I am super tall. I know I've mentioned this to you guys before. So, you know, at this point, you know, when you try it on, whether you have to start adding extra length or if things just aren't sitting right. So I think it's been really good. And I'm very happy with the color. Like I said, I think this is a really good transitional color from summer into fall. I think I'm gonna get a ton of use out of it. I don't really have any hand knit V-neck sweaters. This is a first for me. So I think it's gonna fit super seamlessly into my wardrobe, and I can't wait to finish it up and get it off the needles. So yeah, I think the next time you guys see this, hopefully I will have finished the body and get moving on the sleeves. So I'll see you guys at the next check-in point. All right guys, I'm back, and it's been several days, and I've continued to work on the Cosima sweater. So as you can see, I have a lot more done. I've completed the body, including the ribbing, and bound off. I finished the neckline as well as started the sleeve. So overall, I've tried it on. I'm very happy with the way it fits. I'm pleased with the length. And now I'm just kind of starting to work away on the sleeves. So to catch you up, I believe I last left you when I was starting to add length to the body. As you can see, I do have decrease marks here on the side. So basically, I followed the pattern pretty closely. I did add maybe, I don't know, a centimeter more in between decreases just to lengthen the body slightly to see where that would land me, because oftentimes I need to add extra length in the body. So I knew it would be likely that I would need to add it here. I did check with Gregoria Fibers, and she was fine with that. So I added a little bit of extra length in the body, and then once I got to the ribbing, I did add just a bit of length in the ribbing. So I think it's supposed to be like 2.5 inches of ribbing. I think I went somewhere around 3, but I just wanted it to land on my hip at a more flattering point, so no problem there, and I completed that. So then after that, I moved to the neckline. You can see here, there's ribbing in the neckline. And I picked up too many stitches. So there's a certain stitch count that she wants you to pick up for the neckline. And I picked up, I think, 10 too many stitches. So I did have to knit a couple together rather than frog all of the stitches I had picked up. It's not my favorite thing to do, picking up stitches to do a collar or a hem. So yeah, I just decided to knit a couple together, and I was able to get the number that I needed. So the only thing I will say is that there is a central double decrease here. It's like a typical V-neck decrease, evenly on either sides of that central stitch. I didn't remember, like I had read through the pattern, but I didn't remember that you had to end on a certain sequence in order to start your setup rows for the bind off. So I did end up doing like a couple of rows extra, what was like the recommended width before you start your setup rows. And if I had realized that, I probably would have stopped a little sooner. It's not a super thick neckline, but you can sort of see, you know, it's it's definitely there. It's not like super tight around my neck. I did try it on. It's high neck, but I wouldn't say it's, you know, uncomfortable or it looks strange. I just think like if I were to do this again, or, you know, if I were to recommend it to someone, I would say just make sure you stop short of that, because otherwise you're going to have a thicker neckband basically. But anyways, after that, I started to pick up stitches for the sleeves. So the really nice thing about the sleeve construction, I believe it is considered a drop shoulder construction, but there is a little bit of short row shaping at the top of the shoulder cap. I don't think you're really going to be able to tell here, and certainly from this distance, but there are short rows up at the top there of that shoulder. So she has you, again, cast on a certain number of stitches, but she recommends you cast on with a smaller needle, which is great. You know, it makes it kind of a tighter join up at the top. And then she recommends that you switch to the needle you are working with to get gauge for the sweater. So the issue here was that I began working the short rows with the size 7 needle from the smaller needle. But of course, you know, when you're working short rows, you have to go back and forth. And so my pearls were worked with a smaller size needle and my knits were worked with a larger size needle. At the time I knew this might cause a problem, but I just sort of was trying to move through it and keep going. And so I continued until I completed the section of the short rows and began working in the round to add length to the sleeve. There is a little bit of rowing out here. I'm gonna show you. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it from this distance, but you can sort of see there is a section where the knitting just looks a little less even. It doesn't bother me. I'm thinking it's gonna block out. And with short rows, there's a little bit of inconsistency anyways because of the double stitch you have to work. So all in all, I'm happy with it. I'm gonna keep working on it. I am coming up to the point where I have to add some decreases for the sleeve. I may potentially add a little bit of length like I did in the body for decreases for the sleeve, but we'll see. I'm definitely speeding through this. Like I said, the gauge is nice and big, so it's allowing me to kind of move through it quickly. But yeah, overall, very happy with the fit. Like I said, I did try it on to make sure it's hitting me at the correct area. So yeah, I'm excited and I'm gonna keep working on it and probably finish it up. So the next time we guys chat, I'll hopefully have a completed sweater.
So as you guys can see, I did in fact complete the sweater, and now I'm moving forward with the blocking process. So I have a little bit of fiber wash and I'm adding it to some lukewarm water. As you can see, I have some pumpkins in the background. I grew Jack Be Little pumpkins this season and they are so cute, and the vine produced so many. I definitely recommend. So you'll just see me add the sweater here down into the soapy water, slowly making sure that it's completely submerged and that all the fabric is fully saturated with water. I didn't really notice too much bleeding with this yarn, which is nice. I mean, it wasn't a color work project, so it wasn't something I was actually worried about, but it's always nice to know when you're working with a yarn whether or not it does bleed. So I let this sit for about 15 minutes in the fiber rinse and came back to continue the process. And our German Shepherd Ritter was being the best boy, sitting in my filming room / plant room, watching the garden.
So this video is really meant to give you sort of a more in-depth look at my experience test knitting this Cosima sweater for Gregoria Fibers, and to sort of give you a little bit of insight into, you know, whether or not this is a project you'd like to knit, or if you have questions, or if you're coming up with certain stopping points. Hopefully this video will be helpful or at least relaxing for you as you knit along. All right, so just to recap here a little bit, clearly I'm wearing the sweater and I do love it. I have to say, I've had this sweater finished for, probably a little over a month now, and I've worn it, I don't know, maybe 10 times already, and that's saying something because it hasn't got very cold here yet. I did take it on our honeymoon to Ireland and Scotland recently, so the weather was maybe just slightly chillier there. but I do love it. It's very comfortable, really wonderful layering piece. Even if I just throw it over my shoulders with the arms crossed kind of around the neck, I can pop up some Instagram footage. I'm sure you guys have seen it if you've been following along in previous podcasts, but I do love this sweater, and I'm really happy with my choice to go for alpaca. It's very drapey, very soft, kind of a relaxed, loose fitting look, but also gorgeous. I mean, it's a really luxurious fiber, and I couldn't have been happier with my choice to go for alpaca. Now, I know some people really can't stand the feel of alpaca, so there are other options. Gregoria Fibers does give you other options to work with, but for me, in this case, I held the Sandnes Garn Mini Alpakka held double. So my gauge was slightly off originally. You guys may have heard this. I'm filming this a bit later than when I recorded the rest of this vlog, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but the stitch count was accurate. The length, the row count might have been a little longer. And you know, as I've said before, I know specifically when I was working a Lily Kate Makes her Take Turns tank, I kind of had the same issue where my row gauge was off a little bit, but I don't mind when it runs a little longer because I am tall, 6 feet tall, and generally I need the extra length anyways, so that was fine with me. Now I will note, I did run out of yarn. I did have to purchase more yarn than I anticipated, and quite a bit more than I anticipated. So it could be a me thing, that could be a gauge thing, but it's just something to keep in mind. I know, you know, as I've started to knit more garments, I've realized I really do have to get at least a few extra skeins because I end up needing to add so much length to the body and the arms. So take that with a grain of salt, but it's just something I noticed. So another point that I came across when I was working the short rows is the word last. So just a bit of confusion here. For her, last means previous when working the double stitch in short rows. So that might just be because I haven't worked short rows that many times. Like I said, I've only really started knitting garments this last year, so I haven't done short rows that many times. I'm just not that familiar with the technique. But for some reason that really tripped me up, and I did have to rip out the upper back and kind of start again. So just something to note. She may have fixed it in tech editing. I don't know if that was convoluted for anyone else. It probably was just me, but just something to be aware of. Another note that I made here in my little notebook was about the neck. So there is an Italian bind off here, a tubular bind off. So when you're working the ribbing, she makes it a point to stop at a row where you have, when you have purls surrounding the center stitch. So when you're doing a center double decrease, you want to make sure you end on a row that has the 2 purl stitches on either side of the decrease. I kind of forgot that you need to do setup rows for this type of bind off, so I went maybe a little deeper than I would have otherwise. I think if I were doing this again, maybe I would have stopped like 1 purl row previously, or where the purls end up on either side of the stitch previously. I don't think it's too deep of a neckline, but I do think it's something to be aware of. Specifically, you know, when you're working this type of bind off, you need to do 2 setup rows to create that kind of like double knitting or that tube. So it's just something I noticed. I don't think it's a make or break situation. Again, I didn't have to rip it back. I didn't feel like it's too, you know, constricting, but it's something to be aware of. So another interesting feature about this pattern is that there are short rows at the top of the sleeve cap here. I cast on the stitches using a US 4, and then I switched to a US 7 before working the short rows at the top of the shoulder. I did notice there was a little bit of rowing out, and that's because I didn't switch all of my needles to a US 7. I think I was still using the 4 that I cast on with. You know, it's not really noticeable. I wouldn't say it's something that is egregious or you can really tell, especially with alpaca, because there is a little bit of this halo kind of, you know, around the yarn itself, but it is something to note. And if I were to do it again, I probably would switch to a 7 pretty immediately. And then lastly, I did do an extra decrease round for my sleeves, and then I added a little bit of length to the cuffs. So these are very long sleeves, and if you see in the finished footage of me where I'm wearing it, they are long sleeves. You know, it's kind of a rarity for me as a tall person to have anything that's long, especially in a sleeve. So I kind of love it. I think it's supposed to be, in my mind, this is a cozy sweater. The fiber is cozy and drapey. It has sort of a casual look about it, and I like having this extra length. That being said, you certainly don't have to make the sleeves quite as long as I did, and I think you'll see probably in her pattern photos that it's not meant to be like an overly long sleeve. It's just a really classic, beautiful sweater, beautiful V-neck sweater. And I'm very happy with it, and I would recommend it. If you're looking for something that's this style, this shape, go for it. I just think it's such a fun, easy knit. There really wasn't any stumbling points, and that's kind of saying something when you're test knitting, because oftentimes, they're trying to find out if there are any points of friction where, the knitter might have issue or trouble getting through a pattern. So like I said, I'm very pleased with it. I recommend the pattern. I like Gregoria Fibers. I like how she writes her patterns. For me and the way my brain works, they make sense. Honestly, I would even consider doing this in another fiber, in another color. That's how much I like this sweater, and that's how much I've worn it. So the proof is in the pudding there. If you're wearing a garment over and over again in a pretty short span, honestly, and I even took it on a trip with me. I mean, I think that kind of says it all. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project vlog. This is the first one that I've ever made. It's new to me and certainly something that I could continue to do in the future. So give me your feedback. Let me know what you guys think. Would you like to see other aspects that I didn't cover? Do you think there's any way I could have improved the vlog? If you enjoyed it, let me know that. If you're excited to knit this sweater, please let me know. But as always, I really appreciate you guys following me here and on Instagram, subscribing to my channel, liking and commenting are all really great ways to support me as I continue on this knitting journey. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.